And live on DSTV channel 421, GoTV channel 125. Over the next half hour, Connect Africa with me, Blessed Soga. We will give you a number of stories making the rounds across the African continent, but we'll get into our main topic for today in a jiffy. First, though, we give you news from Nigeria, Egypt, and Mali.
Nigeria's central bank has raised interest rates in an effort to curb inflation on a day when thousands of people have been protesting against the government's handling of the economy. Inflation has reached almost 30%, leaving many millions struggling to afford food. Last year, President Bola Tinubu scrapped a costly subsidy causing the price of fuel to triple. He also devalued the Nigerian currency, the naira, prompting a hike in the price of imports. Those reforms have led to widespread anger. Nigeria's Finance Minister Wale Edun told the BBC that people needed to be patient as the measures would in time benefit Nigeria's economy. Egyptian Air Forces on Tuesday airdropped humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip. According to state-run Al Qaeda News, the airdrop was conducted in cooperation with Jordan and the United Arab Emirates. It said 10 tons of aid supplies were dropped in northern Gaza. UN aid agencies say they're being systematically prevented from carrying out their work in Gaza, and their staff are being attacked. It said patients are forced out of ambulances and the medical team were made to strip. The Italian government says 3 people from the same family who were kidnapped in Mali in May 2022 have been released. The husband, wife and son, called Rocco Langoni, Maria Danota Caivano and Giovanni Langoni, were seized from Kutiala, close to the border with Burkina Faso. The BBC reports it is not yet clear what happened to their Togolese domestic worker who was also abducted. A group linked to Al Qaeda was reportedly behind the kidnapping.
And now, Ghana's President Akufo-Addo, who is also the former chairperson of the Economic Community of West African States Heads of Authority, has touted as an achievement the fact that Ghana remains the only safest West African country yet to experience violent extremism. At the risk of sounding pedestrian, he indicated how glad he was to be able to report that the entire territory that makes the nation is safe, secure, and under the control of the government and the people of Ghana.
Unfortunately, far from it being an everyday truism, this is no longer a statement or claim that can be easily made in these times in the neighborhood in which we are. West Africa is under threat of terrorism and violent extremism, rapidly spreading southwards from the Sahel to coastal West Africa. We can no longer take the territorial integrity of our countries for granted. Indeed, many of our neighbors have already fallen victim and lost large portions of their territories to extremist groups. And Ghana, by the grace of the Almighty, is the only coastal state along the Gulf of Guinea that has so far not recorded a terrorist attack. To speak of the peace and security we have in our country has not happened by chance. It has taken deliberate policy and planning on the part of government and a lot of hard work and dedication on the part of our security services to keep our country safe and secure. I might add that it has also meant that we've had to spend a lot of money that would have otherwise have been available to spend on many of our development needs. But I believe we're all agreed that the primary responsibility of the state towards its citizens is to provide and guarantee peace and security, and we're doing just that. Since we came into office, we've ensured a significant expansion of the armed forces and all the other security agencies. We're paying diligent attention to their welfare as well. The accommodation and physical environment generally of the security agencies are being improved. We've quickened the pace of the retooling and equipping of the security agencies to ensure readiness towards the emerging security threats. For the majority of us, in our everyday activities, it is the security of our streets and homes and communities that concern us most. We want our children and grandchildren to grow up in a safe atmosphere, and the Ghana Police Service played the lead role in this. Again, government has performed most creditably. The police are much better equipped than they have ever been, and their increased visibility on the streets goes a long way to reassure the community. The changing image of the police is perhaps best exemplified by the dramatic facelift they have given to the frontage of the police headquarters on the Ring Road in Accra.
And Akufo-Addo was making these remarks today when he delivered the State of the Nation address. Joining me via Zoom now is a global affairs analyst, Olsen Igwe, who's helping us to, dissect matters, knowing that just over the weekend, Austin, we had our president joining other heads of state from the West Africa sub-region at the ECOWAS headquarters at an extraordinary summit, which was seeking to tackle, issues relating to unconstitutional changes in government and also the growth in violent extremism across the sub-region. Thanks for joining us, though. But I want us to first of all listen to the president of the ECOWAS Commission, Dr. Omar Aliyu Toure, who is now giving us a sense of what the way forward will be in the regional response to what countries such as Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, which recently experienced a military takeover.
With regard to the withdrawal of the three countries, the authority notes that the withdrawal will have political, socio-economic, financial, and institutional implications for the three countries as well as for ECOWAS as a region. The authority recognizes that the withdrawal will automatically affect the immigration status of the citizens, as they may be required to obtain visas to travel around the region. Citizens may no longer be able to reside or set up businesses under ECOWAS arrangements and may be subject to diverse national laws. The three countries will cease to use ECOWAS passports, ECOWAS biometric national identity cards, and the region-wide ECOWAS brown card vehicle insurance. Reviewing the implications at the institutional level, the authority has resolved to lift with immediate effect the following measures imposed on the Republic of Niger. A, closure of land and air borders between ECOWAS countries and Niger to be lifted. No-fly zone of all commercial flights to and from Niger is to be lifted. Suspension of all commercial and financial transactions between ECOWAS member states and Niger is to be lifted.
And of course, he went on and on with a raft of measures as part of the regional response to the growing threats within the West Africa sub-region. Austin, first of all, your take on what transpired over the weekend and the fear now that Ghana appears to be the oasis amongst all of these troubled nations.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me. Yeah, it's clear that sanctions have been lifted, not just in Niger, but also in the other two military-led countries. But to be sincere to you, I think it is the right thing to be done. ECOWAS reviewed this measure that sanctions alone as a standalone isn't going to really pull anything out. After all, seeing what's happening with those three countries, their relationships outside of the region, and trying to then build alliances outside of the region was also a growing threat. Sahel is already the pit within security problems. even though Ghana has said, Ghana president has well, for me, I think it's a claim. Well, he said it's a validity that Ghana is the only country without any terrorist attack. But I know at some point Ghana had to bust on homes for fear of terrorism. Maybe there was no attack, but maybe there were fears of attack. I want to congratulate Ghana. I haven't taken that. For that very strong level of claim, unlike in Nigeria where terrorist attack is almost like a daily basis. I think the sanctions that have been lifted is in the right direction, but beyond the sanctions that have been lifted, it is time for this military coup to return back to the transition process. ECOWAS to do more, to press more. I haven't done this. It is important for these three countries to also return the appreciation by doing the needful, by putting in place the transition process as soon as possible to have it done within the possible nearest time.
Body ECOWAS is being questioned now, isn't it? Looking at the kind of response we're seeing to developments with, in the Sahel and how we're now dealing with unconstitutional changes in government. Do you feel that the organization is being a bit shaky, not steadfast in the kind of response that it would want to, met out to these challenges?
I think ECOWAS is more strategic, more technical, because any decision taken now may have an effect that may not benefit the commission. The commission, not necessarily the countries, the commission, because as it were, like already stated, it's obvious, very obvious, that the pullout of these countries will have more negative impact on the countries that are pulled out. Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali will suffer more than the other countries of West Africa. Why do I say so? Even though we talked about the passport and all of those immigration issues, insurance issues, but beyond that is the economic concerns. Because right now, Niger is facing already hardship by the close of border. When Nigeria closed border to Togo, to Benin at some point, it was even harder for Nigeria until the border was opened. So imagine sanctions in a country that's already landlocked, a country that need other countries technically for survival. So if they produce food, they can't send out the food. They can't even, they don't have a sea to put them out to the West or to other countries. They are locked down. And you see the other countries, Mali, Burkina, all three landlocked countries are together. They've called themselves Sahelian state. Take it or leave it. This is also an area that is dominated by security, the likes of ISWAP and all manner of insecurity and security challenges. So it will be double benefit for these three countries to return as soon as possible. Their reliance on Russia isn't in their best interest. The best they can get for Russia will be security, or maybe a few grains coming in from Russia. But for economic prosperity, for mutual benefit between countries, they won't get that now, because Niger is relying on Benin to pull out their raw materials, their natural resources out to other countries, particularly France and elsewhere. And now, with this land border, with the closure, with the sanctions, it impacted them a great deal. It also impacted Benin. So it's not just Niger. The close of border also impacted Nigeria, whether they like it or not. But it will have greater impact on this landlock, because landlock is a peculiar challenge. And that is why countries like Rwanda is relying on Tanzania to be able to have access to the sea, to move to have access to international community. So landlock is a challenge on its own. And when you're now placed on sanctions, it's a double tragedy. And I think lifting it will be in the right direction. And I think this country should, as soon as possible, return back to the trajectory and set out a transition plan and then work towards it. And I believe that ECOWAS will support them very quickly.
But I see, even your president now, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is being questioned in terms of his leadership that he brings to bear now into the sub-regional body ECOWAS, being the chairperson of the Authority of Heads of State. What's your personal assessment of the kind of expertise he's bringing on board to for the lack of better words, these military leaders back into the space or framework of ECOWAS, because they've announced that they are technically exiting the bloc?
Yes, I think the Nigerian president and chair of ECOWAS was ill-advised at the very beginning of this crisis, particularly with Niger. I mean, when he came on board, there was already the challenge in Mali and Burkina. So he came in, and his very first assignment was Niger. And that statement he made, for me, was ill-advised. I think that it was highly criticized by all. I criticized it a number of times in many fora. And I think what he ought to have done was to understudy and check properly. Even to make the first phone call would have been a worthwhile action. Place a call. What is happening? Can we have a conversation? And he's never been a military official, so he's never been a general. To now want to deploy military into countries where you have never fought a war, technically, he's never been involved with war. Unless in those days when he was part of Nadeco, who was fighting the military at that time in Nigeria, General Sani Abacha. Beyond that, he had never played any role in the military. And now becoming president and commander-in-chief of the armed forces, just stepping into power as chair of ECOWAS without technical competence, as it were, and going out to make those kind of very strong commentaries. I think it was advised to take that decision because they wanted to avert the route of Mali and Burkina, particularly Mali, who had promised all manner of transition plan,
right.
Or Burkina, who kept promising. And in fact, don't forget that the military leader in Burkina continued to say that other countries in West Africa are also not democratic, that the manner in which they found themselves in power is also not really very democratic. After all, elections in the region has become a challenge. Election become a military scene where you see on a polling day, military actions are in place, people are driven out, the vote of people don't count, whether it happened in Nigeria or elsewhere in West Africa. So these guys are relying on democratic democratic backsliding,
right.
And they are relying on the failure of the leadership selection process, particularly the failure of election to select the right candidate. And they are trying to now limp on it, that this is the reason why they took over power in their own countries. That you that is placing sanctions on us, you that is claiming to be Democrat, are you actually democratic? I think it's now that the president of Nigeria must speak truth to power with his colleagues, particularly in Senegal, that you have a Macky Sall, who is part of the same heads of government, making these decisions and placing these sanctions, don't want to leave power, whereas he's supposed to be a democratically elected president and extending his own tenure by his own self, using the parliament. That is a democratic coup. And I think ECOWAS must now talk to themselves to say, well, we must, if we believe in equity, we must come to equity. If we must criticize these military leaders, we must really come to equity. That's the right to be done. I think the president of Nigeria has learned his lesson. They've reverted, sanctions have been dropped, but it's time for us to go back to the table and consult properly and then do a way forward that is beneficial to the peoples of ECOWAS.
Well, but for Macky Sall, the countdown is on. We await April 2, where he says he'll be stepping down as president. Even before that, the belief is that the trend we're seeing now is beyond just, a lack of trust or faith in democracy across West Africa, isn't it? Just a couple of days ago, in fact, in the last 24, 48 hours or so, even in Nigeria itself, the Nigerian forces having to come out to deny claims that there's been a military takeover in the Federal Republic. It's as though the threats are, spread all over the place. Do you see this simply as a spillover effect of what's happening in, the Sahel?
No. I think what's happening is the economic crunch that is affecting every state of West Africa. People are hungry and they are calling for an alternative. Unknown to the people calling for an alternative isn't a solution. Look at what's happening in Burkina Faso. Look at Niger. Look at Guinea. When military takes over power, you usually see the euphoria on the street. You see the incitement. In Niger, in Burkina Faso, when Touré became, when he took over power as military leader in Burkina, you see the excitement on the street. People we're hailing the military. And you see in Niger, flags belonging to France were burnt. And you see in Guinea particularly, that's very interesting, how the people of the dynamics has changed. As I speak to you in Guinea, they are protesting. They don't happening in Burkina Faso. If you argue just 2 days ago or today, I think If you criticize the government, two civil society officials were picked up the government for insecurity in Burkina Faso. They place a gun in your hands and ask you to maintain the order. They said the elected officials were not doing the right job and they wanted to come in. Those in Nigeria, elsewhere in West Africa, they don't know the effect of military. Military has a very short life. It's not. See, if we could say that the election is not delivering on the expectation of the people, but in all honesty, military with what we have, the 4 countries under military are technically worse off. They are not improving the livelihood of the people.
Yeah, but,
they are not improving the living standard of the people.
That's the argument you'd make, but democracy isn't helping them, is it? Based on even what ECOWAS has found out itself, that the reaction to almost all of these military takeovers is that people appear to support the military.
People don't know what is free speech. You don't know what is free association. You don't know what is being able to air your view publicly. See, these are not things you can buy. I know. Okay, now let's put the economic aspect.
Right.
That you thought that in Guinea, with the level of corruption, there will be reduction in corruption and there will be increase in developmental affairs because now cost of living, cost of governance would have dropped because you don't have all of the parliament, all of these so-called political actors who are highly corrupt. You don't have them. Why are people still poor? So if you say in Nigeria, we have the Senate, you have the House of Representatives, you have all manner of ministries. In Nigeria, just a few minutes ago, the government has resolved to reduce and merge and submerge entities of government, ministries and departments, particularly parastatals, to try to subsume or submerge them to reduce cost. In the military regime in Burkina Faso, you don't have all of those. These are military actors who earn salaries as military officials. Why are they not able to meet the needs of the people? So if you put that side by side, you check what you enjoy and the free speech and freedom of association and human rights affair. Look at what's happening in Burkina Faso. The head of the lawyers went on strike last week protesting. One of their lawyers was picked up at the airport and to date, over 20 days or thereabout, till now, it's not been released. If you try that in Nigeria, you're going to see an outcry of people. Even though they don't release the individual, we're going to see the outcry. You can't try that in Burkina Faso. These are some of the benefits. And I sincerely need people to criticize your democratic elected government. Criticize them. Let them do well. Let them put structure in place to deliver good to the generality of the people. But calling for military is not an alternative. I repeat, it is not an alternative. It is worse off. It can only be beneficial for the first 2, 3, 4 months or 6 months, after which it becomes the hardest of time. Check it out. There are evidence to show.
So going forward, what would you recommend as the immediate steps for ECOWAS and also West African leaders to consider? I
think now ECOWAS should follow through. You mentioned just now April 2nd is deadline for Macky Sall. Macky Sall already had burnt the democratic candle. On February 25th, folks, voters in Senegal went to their polling unit to show their voting card that today was supposed to be voting, sending a very strong message that there is need for ECOWAS heads of government or authority to support the peoples of ECOWAS. It is time we transit from ECOWAS of the state to ECOWAS of the people. We must connect ourselves together, particularly citizens of ECOWAS, because we speak with the same voice. We are passionate about the community where we belong. The heads of government are just a small number of people. You can call them a cabal or cabalocracy, a government of a few, organized by the few, to take decisions on behalf of all of us. I think it's time for these heads of authority to know that business is no longer as usual, where you think that because you control military, you are the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, you can deploy anybody at any time. No, it is no longer like that. The power of the people is much more than the power of people in authority.
Well, Austin Aigbe, thank you for spending some time with us here on Connect Africa. Of course, we'll connect again. Thank you. And that's all we have for you in this package of the program. For more news, log on to myjoyonline.com. We have lots of stories there for you. I'm Blessed Sogan. We'll see you again. Bye-bye.